Hey people! Today I'm going to show you how to make a chamomile mousse cake, which is perfect for the spring because it combines honey and chamomile and they go super well together. The first step of this cake is to make the sponge cake, which is going to be on the bottom. Preheat the oven to 350 degrees. After that, we're going to combine the eggs in this recipe, the sugar, the flour, the olive oil, some baking powder, and vanilla, and sugar and cardamom in this bowl. And we're going to beat it on high for about 6 minutes. The eggs, I have about 5. It's not quite 250 grams, but I think it'll be okay. The sugar, the flour, the olive oil, the baking powder, little bit of vanilla, a pinch of salt, and I measure by using the crack of my hand. Fill it up a little bit. That, a little bit. And cardamom, because I read on the tea packets that cardamom goes very well with chamomile. So I'm going to add a little bit more in the sponge cake so it has more flavor. Yeah, cardamom. And then, like I said, we're going to mix it on high for 6 minutes. Just want to show you what it looks like. So it's kind of liquidy, kind of like a pancake batter, kind of. Like runny. Add in the milk. And then beat on medium for about 2 minutes. The mixture is a little bit more liquidy with a little bit more bubbles. So I think it's ready to pour on this tray. It's just a normal tray lined with parchment. So yeah, we're going to dump this on here. And this layer will rise a good amount, so it won't stay very flat, and it will become like a sponge. That's why it's called a sponge cake. And there probably is a bit more than you actually need for the cake itself. So if you have extra, you can use it in whatever recipe you want. Make cupcakes, little bite-sized things. It's really fun to use up the scraps. Now it's ready to put in the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes, or until it's browner than this, like golden brown.
See you when it comes out.
Okay, so this just came out of the oven and it looks golden brown. I actually put a toothpick in it to see if it came out clean, and it did. So that's a good sign. Yeah, I think I can just do that. Like that. This is actually really good. I'm going to trace the shape of the cake that we're actually using. I'm using this Wilton 6-inch-ish. Yeah. So, yep, just trace this and cut out the shape. So, yeah. Ooh. Oops. Okay. It doesn't matter if you don't have paper on it. That's just for the next step for the actual mousse. I've just used this to make the shape. So yeah, here's the result that's gonna go on the bottom of our cake. It's nice and spongy. And you can use the scraps to roll it, maybe make a rolled cake and other stuff. So now we're gonna move to making the honey yogurt mousse. But just so you know, after I took the sponge cake out, I cut out the shape and put it on a wire rack with the leftover scraps, so it doesn't, well, to let it dry up a little bit because it was a little humid. Just don't put it in the fridge because it absorbs the flavors from everything else in there, and I think dries up a lot more. These are the ingredients that we're going to use in this part of the cake. So there's going to be some Greek yogurt. I'm using 5% fat. I don't really think it matters that much. It's just probably going to be more rich. Some white chocolate chips. A bit of honey. It doesn't really matter what kind you use. I find it all tastes good. There's vanilla. About the same amount as last time. Like half a teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon. Some cream, heavy whipping cream, some gelatin, and like half a teaspoon of water to soak the gelatin and let it bloom and like become like a gel. So for the gelatin, we're gonna bloom it, and that means to sprinkle it evenly over this water. It makes it more like consistent and homogeneous. So yeah, just go slowly and go everywhere. And it's normal that it gets very hard, and yeah, because we don't want the cake to be wet. You really want it to be gelatinous. And we can spread it around a little bit with a spoon to make sure it gets everywhere. Okay, so it kind of forms like a gross skin thing. Like that, like a gel latex. It's pretty weird. So now we are at the stove with the white chocolate chips, the Greek yogurt, the gelatin, the vanilla, and the honey. I have some simmering water here and a makeshift bain-marie. And I just boiled it by putting it on like medium-high. I think everyone knows how to do that. So now we're gonna put the chocolate chips in here with about 1/4 of this yogurt. It doesn't have to be precise. Just, yeah, kind of like that. And we're gonna wait for it to melt. This is almost all incorporated, and when it is, we're gonna add the gelatin in and take it off heat, and then add well, the rest of everything else. Okay, that looks pretty good. Take it off heat, add the gelatin, and let the heat of the bowl and the white chocolate melt this gelatin. Now we can add the rest of the yogurt. The vanilla. And the honey. Now we just mix that in to completely incorporate it. You don't want any bumps. Doesn't that look good? After, while the white chocolate mixture is cooling off and resting set aside, we're gonna whip the whipping cream like you normally whip cream to stiff peaks on high for, well, until it's on stiff peaks. So the cream is all whipped pretty stiff, and incorporate the white chocolate mixture, which is room temperature about, into the cream. So here we go, little bit by little bit. It will look very liquidy at first, but the gelatin will start its work and solidify the whole thing. Final step for the mousse. I poured it in, and we can refrigerate it overnight to make it stiffen and be ready to unmold. The mousse cake has been sitting overnight in the fridge, covered with saran wrap, and it's set. So now we're gonna assemble it to the bottom of the cake, which is the sponge cake. We're gonna fill this glass with hot water and insert this knife in the water to get it nice and like smooth. So yeah, you let it get warm, and we're gonna cut around this paper because the paper did stick to the cake. So we're gonna try our best to cut through and separate it, and it works pretty good. You just have to frequently dip it in the water. I cut around all the sides so it's not sticking anymore, but it's a little wet, so I'm gonna put it in the freezer for about 5 minutes so it kind of gets harder. Now the mousse cake has been sitting in the freezer for about 5 minutes. We're gonna try to put these together. Gonna stress a lot about it, but we gotta do it. Okay, so first you want to make sure that the parchment that's lining your cake pan is as short as possible, so it's not like pushing, it's not going to push the sponge cake up. So put the sponge cake on top like that, and place the rack on top of it. And then I'm just gonna wash my hands. This is the most stressful part of this thing. We're gonna lift up the cake, keep our hand here, and flip it. Okay. Actually, no, that's not the most stressful part. It's to take this thing off. Oh gosh. Yeah, try to unmold it. Here we go. Oh god, okay. Ooh, that looks kind of ugly, but you know what, that's okay. Yeah. Looks like a big piece of brie cheese. Okay, well, you want to take off the parchment paper like this. Throw that out. And go around the sides too. I actually put the cake in the fridge, well, in the freezer, for about 5 minutes again, just to make sure it's stiff enough to make the holes. And I'm going to make the holes with a straw. I'm using a plastic one because I feel like the edge is smaller and cuts easier. I was going to use a metal one to not like use plastic, but it wouldn't work as well, so I'm using this. So you soak it in hot water and start like kind of close to the edge, go in and kind of make sure it gets sucked up. Yeah, so see, you have a little bit in here, and I can just like blow that out in the cup. So just go around the whole cake, making holes. Now, after making the holes, we just have to leave this in the freezer until we pour over the gel that we're going to make in the next steps. So for the last part of the recipe, the chamomile gel on top, we're going to be using some granulated sugar, some honey, some gelatin, and some water. We also have to have some chamomile tea bags and some hot water. So this is just the tea that is put together. So yeah. We're going to start off by blooming the gelatin like we did before. Just sprinkling it over the water evenly so that it soaks up. So after letting the tea steep for a good amount of time, you want to squeeze out as much liquid as you can to get all the flavors. And I'm going to save the bag and maybe use some of the leaves and flowers inside to garnish on the top. So after doing that, pour the tea to a pan and with the sugar and cook that on medium heat. So now that it's at a boil, we're going to take it off heat and add in the gelatin. And that will melt right away. That's melting. And at the end, we can add the honey. Stir and let cool for 30 minutes in the fridge. Just keep watching it though, because you don't want it to turn into a jelly right away. You want to be able to pour it before and yeah, not have to scrape a jelly out of a container. Finally, the last step for this cake is to pour over the cooled room temperature gelatin mix, which is still pretty runny. If I were to let this cool off any longer, it would become solid. So we're going to pour it over this cake and make sure it gets in the holes. It's a weird kind of glaze, really. Turn it around to see what you're doing. Okay. You can pick up some of this stuff. Okay, that looks pretty good. And yeah, wait for this to completely set. So this is the first layer of gel that we're going to put on top. We're going to put this in the freezer and heat up the rest that was dumped in here that like fell. We're going to heat that up on the stove, wait for it to get thick like it did before, and pour over a second coat. Oh, goddess. I forgot how much I had to let the smoke evaporate. Okay, let's fall. I would leave this out in the counters. We have to put this in the freezer until we're ready to pour over the gelatin glaze.
Start that over.
Stop! I'm gonna try to flip it onto this this thing, sponge cake. I'm so scared. Goddess.